Add us.
Yeah.
Hello.
Hey, everybody. We are here with Creators Corners. This is a first, by the way, because normally one of us has run Creators Corner, but we're both here because we can be. We figured why not? And we're excited this week because we've got a very special guest over from a dice tower.
We got Roy.
How's it going?
Roy.
Glad to be here.
Oh man, Roy Cannaday.
Yes, we're so excited to have you, Roy. Creators Corner. We were talking a little bit before, but you've been in podcasts and you've done all these things before. This is just it's a fun thing just to have these conversations. So we're so glad you could be here, especially because you're here now. I know a lot of people may know who you are, but if you could give everybody a little bit introduction into just who you are for those who may not.
So I'm Roy Cannaday. I work at the Dice Tower. I do a lot of editing and live stream production. I also do reviews. I also do like Favorite Game Friday and other random content over on the Dice Tower. But mostly I do a lot of behind the scenes work and run our live streams. I also prep things for a lot of our other stuff and run stuff at shows that we do and help with a lot of our events and things over at the Dice Tower as well. But I also do game design work. My first game, Last Light, came out on GameFound, and it did pretty okay. I think it did well. Most people would say it did really well. But yeah, I've been playing that and demoing that for a ton of people, and it should be coming to people this summer. So I'm super excited. It's a fast-paced Space 4X game that plays in an hour with up to 8 people, which is pretty crazy and pretty new. But yeah, super excited to be here on the show with you guys.
Yeah, and one of the things we ask everybody on Creators Corner, Roy, is about their board game origin story. And I want to start by kind of bringing that question forward. We got Rachel in the house, by the way. Always great to see Rachel. Thanks for
Rachel
joining us tonight. So, where does your kind of journey in board games begin? What's the game you remember? What's the game experience you remember that kind of got you on this exciting journey that has you here as a designer?
Oh, dag. So my dad was really big into board games growing up, just tabletop games in general. So we played a lot of the normal stuff growing up, like the normal, like mass market style games, but he also taught us games like Dune and, like Car Wars, and he got us really big into Gamma World, like when I was a preteen, which is kind of like post-apocalyptic D&D. So we weren't playing D&D, but we were playing this crazy like mutants running around the post-apocalyptic wasteland. And I played that all the way from like the age of like 12 up to being 18. I played in like a single campaign with like my dad and a whole bunch of friends from school and church and stuff like that. So it's kind of crazy.
How old were you when you played these games? Like, I can't imagine doing as like
anywhere from like preteen on.
Okay.
I know we played like old school, like there was a paper TSR version of War of the Ring that I used to play with my dad as well. We played like chariot racing games and all sorts of like old school, like paper mat games, like Wizard's Quest and all sorts of crazy stuff that like is super old school at this point, but would still be considered not your normal mass market games.
So like Avalon Hill stuff? Like, did you do Magic Realm?
I didn't do, I think my uncle had Magic Realm. I don't think I actually played Magic Realm, but just a bunch of random different things like that. So I grew up kind of like in a gaming household, playing a lot of role-playing games. And of course we did the whole like NES and video games and stuff like that. So I was always a huge fan of that stuff. It's kind of funny because like I was so excited about like this Gamma World post-apocalyptic thing. I was like, man, it'd be cool if this was in the Lord of the Rings setting. So I was trying with my friends to like reverse engineer Gamma World to make it more like daggers and elves and wizards and stuff like that, even though I had no clue that what D&D actually was. So it's just kind of funny that me and my friends were like trying to like draw like stat charts of like, oh, the dagger could be a D4 and the sword could be a D6, which is basically what D&D is. But I was trying to reverse engineer it from like laser pistols and stop sign maces and stuff like that. So it's just kind of funny.
That's hilarious.
But yeah, so I grew up doing that. I played a lot of collectible card games like Pokemon and stuff like that. And then ended up playing Magic and stuff like that. I did start playing stuff like Betrayal at House on the Hill and Flux and Robo Rally and stuff that would be considered more hobby games. But I eventually sold off all of my Magic cards after a set rotation and I was watching a ton of the Dice Tower and just seeing all these different games. And several of my friends from my D&D group and from my old game group that I used to play, like Game World with my dad back in the day, introduced me to like Pandemic and Battlestar Galactica and Shadows over Camelot, and like seeing cooperative board games and what that style of game could do, like really made me start to be obsessed with just like regular tabletop board games. I'm like, oh, you can work together in a board game like you do in like a role-playing game, but it's just versus the game and you're like on the same team. It was kind of like mind-blowing for me. So I kind of got out of Magic and like traded all my Magic cards in for basically board games. And I got like Twilight Imperium and Summoner Wars and Wiz War and a whole bunch of like these big like Fantasy Flight thematic epic games. And a lot of the reasons I knew to pick those games was because I watched tons and tons of Dice Tower reviews. I was a huge fan of the show. And so I started playing a bunch of those games with my game groups. Like the same people I was playing Magic and D&D with before, I was now playing board games with. And it was way more accessible because I could invite anybody over to play board games instead of just the people that knew D&D or knew Magic. You can just kind of bring anybody to the table.
Yeah. And did you ever expect, I guess, that, you know, or want to design a game at that point? Was that ever even something on your mind? Because obviously, you know, when we talk about Last Light, we're talking about as you've described, a fast-moving 4X game, which is not a common phrase. So it's a very different approach to a style of game that clearly you really enjoyed. I mean, what does young you know, probably say when they look at, you know, Board Game Geek and see, you know, designer of Last Light?
It's kind of funny because I feel like I've always tried to kind of like make variants of games or kind of like spin off and like design my own stuff. I used to do tons of like running D&D campaigns and making my own stories. And even as a kid, I would try to like make different systems and be like, oh, why isn't there a game that does this? There were games that did that. I just hadn't played them yet, you know? But as once I got out of Magic, I tried to do a little bit of game design. I just didn't have the knowledge of board game mechanics to make something solid. So I ended up doing a lot of more like board game media and playing a lot more games. And I still kind of like tinkered with design in the background. But after time, after having done podcasting for a while, and I started doing a little bit of like contributor stuff on the Dice Tower and doing a ton of more segments, and I had played a ton more board games at that point, I took another crack at it and made Last Light. I had a bunch of other stuff that's kind of like in the trash now because it wasn't good enough to actually bring to the market. But Last Light was the one that I was proud of and like got the best success in playtesting and just kind of like hit the ground running with that. And it's kind of crazy because I ended up showing it to my friends and they really enjoyed it. And then I ended up taking it to Gen Con and I showed it to Plaid Hat and they were like super stoked about the game. And I was just trying to get feedback and they're like, oh, you should pitch this to us. And it went through a spiral of pitching it and showing it to different publishers and things like that and ended up getting picked up. So I'm really excited about what has happened with the game overall.
There's someone with a specific question about Last Light. So is Last Light a 4X entry point? Well, was that your intention when the project started?
So I'm a huge fan of the 4X genre. I love Twilight Imperium. I love Eclipse. I love all of that stuff. I love Heroes of Land, Air, and Sea. There's tons and tons of different great 4X games out there, but one of the main things is all these games normally take quite a long time to play. Even the ones that say that they're fast playing either don't feel like a true 4X game, or they're just not that fast. They still take a really long time to play. So I was trying to basically figure out a way to take a game that would be different in the genre, so it's not like a carbon copy of anything else, but also would play way faster. Last Light is set around a single star system right before basically all the other stars have gone out, and this is the last star, and you're trying to collect light from that star, but the planets are rotating as the game goes along. And the reason that the game is so fast is because all the actions are simultaneous, but you still have all the exploring and the building up resources and building up all of your ships and moving out your armadas and taking over planets that you would have in other space style 4X games. But it just does it in like way less time because everybody's taking their turn at the same time.
Okay. Because I was wondering, like, how is this working? Because I would imagine 4X games as a long prodding thing. I mean, I remember, you know, prepping people like, hey, we're gonna play TI3 or TI4. It's gonna be 8 hours. We'll have a lunch break. Everyone come at this time. Everyone watch this video beforehand. You know.
Yeah. I did try to make something that was more accessible, but I was still trying to make something that gives you that full like scale and epicness of one of those games. And it's kind of hard to understand and fully understand the scope of it without playing the game. There's been so many people that are like, I feel like it's going to be watered down. I feel like it's going to be simpler and kind of not the thing I'm looking for. And then they play it and they're like, holy smokes, you get it. The main thing is you just get so many more turns in this game than you normally would in a game, because it is always your turn. So it's like every single round, every single turn of the game, it's your turn. You're just all taking those turns at the same time. So like normally you'd sit down for an hour-long game and you get like 1/4 of that time in a 4-player game, you're playing the game. In this game, you're playing 100% of the time. Like you're just going and going and going. So like if you're playing a 4-player game and you're all taking an hour to play, it would normally be like a 4-hour game, but it's crunched down into 1 hour. And that even works with 8 players. The time of the game doesn't really change that much depending on the player count, just because you're taking your turns at the same time. You're all racing to try to get 20 light, but basically the game is just engineered from the ground up to basically not have conflict of actions. And it's kind of a unique thing. I would love to see more games kind of take this approach of simultaneous play. I know there's other games that kind of do that sort of thing, but normally you're kind of like everybody's picking simultaneous and you're doing different things, or you're doing like you're all going through like a series of events. This one, you're all picking things and doing completely different things as those things are happening. And I've kind of like engineered it to kind of like work together at the same time. It's kind of crazy, and I can't wait for more people to play it.
Well, let me pick up that point then, because you're saying that everyone's kind of just going at it, right? And normally those kinds of games, I'm thinking right away like very low player interaction, like very kind of like solitaire. How did you juggle? Because I'm assuming it's a 4X game. There must be a significant amount of player interaction. How does that work with simultaneous play?
It's kind of interesting. So a few of the things that I've done is I made it so that the interaction, there's interaction in the fact that like you're going to be, if you do the trade action, you have to choose a player to give crystals to and things like that. Also, there's a decent amount of combat in the game. If multiple people play the combat card at the same time, you'll have to go in turn order a little bit for that. But there can be plenty of rounds where combat's actually asynchronous in the game, so only the person that plays the combat card is moving and doing the attacking. So if one person plays combat and nobody else does, they're going to get to move out and attack other players, and the other players aren't really going to be rolling back. So it has this interesting dynamic of being able to get the jump on your opponent, but then they're going to play their command card on a different round and attack you back. So I've kind of basically base the game around the fact of trying to make things as streamlined as possible, but still it has tons of interaction. There's tons of combat and rolling. And if 2 people play command at the same time, then you will be attacking back and forth against each other. So it's like this whole mind game of like, okay, they've already played their command this round. They won't be attacking me. Let me go ahead and jump on them before they can jump on me. But oh no, they did this thing. Now they're going to move away. You know, there's all sorts of different things that can happen in the game. You just kind of have to try to be cognizant of what everybody else is doing. So there is a lot of interaction in the game, but it kind of is set where the timing in the game doesn't really conflict as those things happen. It's kind of crazy how things work out.
And you know, it's interesting. Ryan has played, I think, significantly more 4X games than myself. But is it fair to say this game is still going to be kind of, you know, I don't want to say friendly to, but approachable for someone who does board games as a whole and can come in and hasn't maybe not had a ton of experience with 4X games? Or is there a little bit of a learning curve, do you think, on this one?
I think it's been way more accessible than I thought. Mostly because of the quick playtime and the fact that like everything is kind of intuitive. You have several different types of actions. You have researching that's going to get you more technologies. You have mining that gets you resources. You have trading, which allows you to like upgrade those resources. You have constructing, which allows you to build more ships. And then you're refreshing to get cards back into your hand and be able to take those actions again. And there's also command that allows you to move stuff. A lot of people that aren't familiar with 4X has said like everything just kind of feels like it works the way that it should. And I've kind of tried to streamline things and make them as simple as possible and kind of make them intuitive as far as the gameplay goes. And I kind of made this game for like epic 4X gamers to be able to play their epic 4X game in an hour. And in doing so, I somehow made it where people that don't like space games and don't like 4X games are still enjoying this game. I played it with Thinker Themer, who says like they're not into that style of game at all, but they rate this game like a 10 out of 10 just because they love the way the game works and the interactions with the cards and the interactions with the other players and like how fast the game is. The fact that you can play an 8-player big crunchy game in 1 hour and still feel like you made tons of meaningful decisions throughout the entire thing. They like it still is reaching so many more people than I even thought it would.
That's awesome. And I mean, you're saying epic now. Mr. Coaster brought up something that he said that even the prototype looks great. He saw it at Dice Tower West, and I gotta say, I mean, sometimes a lot of these 4X games, like we're talking Eclipse and Twilight Imperium, they have table presence for sure. They have lots of little miniatures, and you really feel like you're moving around an armada around space. How does that translate into Last Light, like the table presence and the components?
So Last Light is basically a square board, and it has 2 rings inside of that square board. And all of these rings have 3D planets on them. Each person is going to have like their little colony ship that has kind of flown in the system in like the corners of the outside of the board. And you're basically building up armadas of ships trying to move into the star that's in the middle. But as the game goes along, at the end of each round, the board is going to rotate, and it's got these 3D planets on the board that are going to be rotating and spinning around, emulating a star system. And basically, when the board rotates, it'll kind of like change the position where you have your armadas and fleets as they're kind of floating around on these planets. It's definitely extremely unique as far as like space games go, having your whole area control, the areas you control are floating in front of your opponents and mixing up the board every time. And it definitely, even with the prototype, like I've had so many people just stop by being like, what is this? What is this? Like, I want to play this just because the way it looks and the table presence. I love that Gray Fox has really like kept like my original design from the prototype and kept 3D planets. I had other publishers that were looking at the game before that were like, oh, we're going to make it discs. We're going to make it all flat. We're going to try to like make it like way less of what it is because it'd be too much to produce. But Gray Fox really followed like that vision and like was super excited about making the game look the way I wanted to look, and just like screams out like you're in this epic, crazy, like spinning 3D planet game that just adds so much to like the theme of the game, I think.
I love those type of pieces though, because I always think of, say, Star Wars Rebellion, which I know obviously very different 2-player game, right. That space epic of sorts, and those pieces, moving those pieces around, it feels significant. And it's the difference in, where I mean, I think it's fair to say, I mean, we've lost like 15 games of Regicide now.
We still haven't won.
Yeah, we still haven't won, and we're playing those online. But the idea of playing a game, especially now in 2022, when I feel like we went so long without getting physical boards to the table, like that concept of moving those pieces across, it makes it really an important experience. So one of the things I'm very interested in though is from the design perspective, not just those pieces, but even the look and feel, the characters. What was your experience with games and seeing all these games, reviewing games through the podcast, through Dice Tower? How did you come up with what the look and feel was going to be in creating really what is your unique universe? Because this is a new universe. This is a new game.
I'm a huge fan of like space. I listen to tons and tons of like online podcasts about astrophysics and like futurism. And like, I listen to a lot of Isaac Arthur. He talks a lot about like, oh, these aliens or those aliens, just all sorts of crazy different stuff. And a lot of stuff of like the future of humanity and the future of like space exploration and stuff like that. And some of the stuff's pretty crazy and out there, but I drew a lot of inspiration from like listening to a lot of astrophysicists talk about like, oh, what the heat death of the universe looks like, or oh, what things look like at the very end of everything. And just thinking about the fact of like, oh, what if there were all these different aliens that had evolved in all sorts of different ways that were coming on this last star, just trying to keep their civilization alive. And I know that seems pretty bleak, but we also kind of kept it like cartoony and like silly with all the different crazy aliens. I drew a lot of inspirations from a lot of other like sci-fi games. I just love the idea of having tons of different aliens out there and having lots of different stuff. I was a huge fan of Masters of Orion back in the day, which is another like video game space for X. They just have like tons of different alien races in those games and like all sorts of different mercenaries you can hire that look all sorts of different crazy different ways. And I just think it's interesting to have aliens that are not only humanoid, but ones that kind of look like wispy ghost like crazy things, or like metallic aliens, like all sorts of weird stuff, like all the crazy stuff you'd see in tons of different sci-fi shows, and just throwing that all together to make it for this, like, this is the last star and the last place that any sort of living life can live, and they're all coming together and trying to figure out how to combat each other to be the civilization that survives is just kind of an interesting concept to me.
So when did the creation process start for you for Last Light? Because the game found ended a couple months ago. When did it begin, like the actual creation up into the game found?
So 2017 is when I first started working on the game. It was like in March or April of 2017. And I started designing it by myself. At the time, I was, it was around the time where I was kind of like, I was working overnights. I was watching my kids like all day during the day, but then I was still kind of trying to work on game design. I was also making content for the Dice Tower in my spare time as well. I was doing a lot of like Favorite Game Friday and trying to do a bunch of different segments for their variety shows and trying to do reviews here and there. And I had my own podcast at the time as well. So I was trying to do all these different things at the same time. But like, I want to take another crack at game design just because I loved 4X games. I love playing Twilight Imperium and Eclipse and Heroes of Land, Air, and Sea, but it's so hard to get to the table in a single game night that I was like, I'm going to try to make something that's gives you that feel, but is still very different and has its own place because it's still a very different game from any of those games. And so I kind of started working on it. I didn't even show it to anybody until like August of that year. I started showing it to guys from my game group. I had just kind of been mulling and like fixing stuff up for a prototype and kind of figuring out the way I wanted the design to work. And I showed it to some of my friends and we played it. We made a few minor tweaks and then I ended up taking it to Gen Con. And one of the things I did at Gen Con is I just took it out and outside the Board Game Geek Hot Games area, I just set the game up. And I set it up because I had these little clay 3D planets I'd made on stands with this rotating board. And I just wanted to get some random people's like thoughts on the game. And just the way that the game looked, I had random people stopping by being like, what is this? I'd be like, oh, this is my game, my prototype. Do you want to try and play it? So I had like 4 random people come up and just like let me demo the game to them. This is my prototype, by the way, just because the way that it looked with the 3D planets, they're like, this looks cool. This looks crazy. And I even remember some guy, I don't even know who he was, like ended up talking, like tweeting out about it and tagging me being like, holy smokes, I played this game at Gen Con. Like, it was just really cool to see somebody like trying to hawk their prototype out there and get some ideas and feedback and stuff on it. And that playtest went really well. So then I ended up showing it to Plaid Hat because I was friends with those guys. They'd been on my podcast a bunch and I talked to them a bunch. So I knew them. I just wanted to get their feedback as well. And they really enjoyed it so much that they were like, you need to pitch this to us. You need to pitch this to us like as soon as you can, like try to clean it up however you need to, but like pitch it to us at the next convention or something like that. It didn't end up staying with Plaid Hat, but yeah, that was just kind of mind blowing to me because I was just trying to get feedback and people were really enjoying the game.
Do you think then that you must then see a ton of value in those unpub rooms that exist now, like PAX Unplugged, for example? All these places now have a spot where all these unpublished games are out there and people are demoing. So because playtesting, obviously a huge piece of this pie to figure out, does this work? Does this not work? Mm-hmm. That does lead me to ask though, how did you go about the playtest? How did you go to expand outside your group? Was it, besides conventions, was there any other means that you went through to get all those opinions before you went to final product?
I did go to an unpub event. I went to Mega MooseCon, had like a little unpub room. I ended up playing like 4 or 5 games of it. And that was actually earlier before the Gen Con event. And I had gotten like some feedback here and there from just random people. I had some designers that like unpub designers or whatever had played the game as well. And then just different people had played around with it. And I ended up taking a few of those ideas and being like, oh, I'm going to tweak this or that. Or, I remember one specific thing was like the cost of the ships I thought was too expensive. So we made the cost of ships lower. So it was easier to get ships out on the board and just random things that you come through playtesting being like, okay, cool, this is good. A lot of playtesting is just really just having people play the game. And as a designer, watching how people interact with it and being like, oh, that needs to be fixed. Oh, I see they're doing that there. Maybe that's too good, or maybe that's too easy for them to do that. Or maybe, oh, they're going to spam that if I don't take care of that. I need to add a limit to that thing, and it's just playing the game over and over again. And honestly, I like to play with the game with as many different people as possible, like get fresh ideas and fresh slate. I played with it at Dice Tower West. I played with it at Dice Tower East. I just played with it at a bunch of the Dice Tower conventions. I played with it at PAX Unplugged. I played with it with tons of different people, just random people all over the place, and just got as many eyes on it as possible. And then after that, I ended up, during COVID, I put it on Tabletop Simulator and just ended up playing it over and over and over and over and over with tons of people. And I mean, I haven't made even since the very beginning, I haven't made any huge mechanical changes, but a lot of the stuff is just like development stuff of like, oh, this thing should cost a little bit more to put out on the board. Oh, this could be exploited. Maybe it needs to be exhausted if you use it instead of just being able to use it over and over again. Just random things like that. Or, oh, maybe that alien ability is a little bit too good. Maybe we should pare it down a little bit. Just seeing how tons and tons of different people interact with the game just gives you so much feel of like how different player styles are going to play your game. And I think can end up making it appeal to a wider audience if you get just a wider audience's feedback.
And it sounds like balance. A lot of that is balancing because you think about, I mean, even with the highly rated game, for example, like Wonderland's War, and a lot of people are talking about Wonderland's War. I even saw in their more recent Kickstarter, they balance out some of the powers. And so I feel like balance is such a critical piece of the puzzle for a game. So for me, the more you get to see, and I've heard it from multiple guests on the show, but what you just talked about, I think stands out to me, which is watching them play, even seeing like a grimace in a moment could be, I imagine, informative. So I appreciate that perspective. I know, by the way, you did use GameFound for it. And I am wondering what your GameFound experience was like. So many people I've spoken to over the course of this show have been mostly on Kickstarter. So GameFound is a brand new world for so many people. But what was your GameFound experience like?
So we decided to launch on GameFound, and this was the first like original release. I think Gray Fox had done, for Gray Fox at least, Gray Fox had done After the Empire like a reprint on GameFound, but they were going to actually do a full game. They were going to do Last Light on GameFound. And so we decided to do that. I was kind of excited because the Dice Tower was working with GameFound a little bit. So I was like, oh, I know GameFound and I know the guys from Awaken Realms run it. So I was kind of excited. I know that maybe not as many eyes would be on the game as would be through Kickstarter, but it's kind of cool to be on a platform made by gamers for gamers. So I was kind of excited about that. And the prospects of kind of like, oh, we're going to like kind of like try to pioneer like this new marketplace or whatever, and like kind of keep a little bit more of the margins in the gamer's pocket and in the gamer sphere instead of just giving all the money like 10% or whatever to just Kickstarter. But I think it did quite well for like a GameFound campaign, especially first time designer. This was Gray Fox's first full game on GameFound. GameFound super new, and it made like $500,000 on the thing, and we had tons of backers, and we still had tons of late pledges after, so tons and tons of people got on the campaign. I feel like it was a good experience overall. It will be interesting to see because we'll probably end up maybe seeing how things would do on Kickstarter as well with expansion. Who knows? We'll see what happens in the future. So
I'm excited. Actually, I don't know when is this planning to come into retail? Is it next year, 2023? I saw that on the Board Game Geek page, but
right. I think looks like it's going to be 2023. It'll probably be getting to backers around summertime, so that sort of thing. We're trying to probably have copies at Gen Con and all of that stuff. So,
I gotta say, it's inspiring because you had this passion to make this game design, and also you were full time on the Dice Tower, right? And I can't imagine that that's a very demanding time. I mean, Dice Tower comes out so many videos, When did you join the Dice Tower? Can you talk about that experience?
So I've been with the Dice Tower for, I guess, in January it will be 4 years. So I guess it's been more than 3.5 years now. So basically, Last Light I had the game basically done before I started working full time for the Dice Tower. But then I ended up doing even more with it later on. I'd been doing content for the Dice Tower for a long time. I had my own podcast, Epic Gaming Night, back in the day. And then I kind of spun into also doing stuff for the Dice Tower, doing reviews, doing just random videos. I did like a 24-hour marathon with them. I like went down to Florida. I started helping them a lot at like their booth at like Gen Con and just being with them at different events. I shot a bunch of videos with them at CMON Expo one year. So I just got to know the guys really well. And a position for an editor opened up. And I applied for it. And I ended up getting the job. So I ended up moving me and my family down to Homestead, Florida, to actually join and be full-time for the Dice Tower. I guess, what would that be? 2000, what was 3 years out? 2019, right? Yeah. So So yeah, 2019, and ended up started doing a bunch of stuff with the Dice Tower there. So I basically started doing all of the review editing for Tom's reviews. So I basically edit all of Tom Vassel's reviews. And then we started doing more like running all the live streams for our top 10s and stuff like that. And as I started joining the Dice Tower, we started switching over to a lot more live stream stuff. And now I do a lot of the live stream production and do a lot of the intros and outros for all that stuff and running those live streams.
And I do love the live stream portion. I think it's, everything evolves, right? And I think that was a wonderful evolution for a channel. We're obviously a fan of live streaming, all the things that we do.
For sure. I mean, we get to interact people.
Yeah.
Like Kyle's waving.
Wave.
Kyle. Yeah, I mean, but when it comes down to it, how much were you a part of that transition in the sense of even just having the technological knowledge? Because I always joke, like there's always the tech guy, right? And it sounds like you came in and offered a ton of technical knowledge right up front as the editor for the channel.
It's really kind of funny because all of my stuff is basically self-taught. I ran a podcast like you guys do and did live streams for like a long time. And so I kind of had like my experience of running like OBS and running different live stream programs, just kind of how to run them and be a part of them, and just got experience from doing that. And then I just kind of like edited my own stuff by making videos and editing up my podcast and editing up reviews and stuff like that for the channel. I just got experience doing that. So when I came on, they had a different system that they used. I was using basically the Adobe suite, so Adobe Premiere to edit all the videos. The Dice Tower used Final Cut, so I had to switch over and learn how to do all that stuff. So it was a little bit of a learning curve of me learning how to do the new stuff, but basically all the skills that I kind of knew from doing that with like keyframing and all that stuff kind of translated over into Final Cut once I figured out how to use everything. And then we used a live stream machine to kind of do stuff and just learning that program, and then kind of going from there. And basically it was just the experience of being able to, it's almost like a rhythm game, running a live stream. It's like, oh, now play the intro, now switch to this, now pop up the comment, now change to this, now play the top 10, like number 10, that sort of thing. And it's just like making sure the timing's good, making sure everything's in the right place, making sure you just have. The interesting thing is like everybody says, oh, live streaming is easier than editing the stuff. Well, not exactly, because with live streaming, you have to make sure everything's prepped beforehand. Everything has to be in the perfect place and all the timing has to trigger just right. So there's a lot of prep on the beginning and setting everything up for the live stream instead of having to edit it afterwards. With editing, you can just record all the stuff and then you can edit it afterwards. So it's like, depends on where the work is. And live streaming, you have to like have everything kind of go off without a hitch, and sometimes those cracks show through, but half of doing a live stream is knowing how to troubleshoot stuff on the fly. It's like, oh, the microphones aren't working. Oh, now they're working. Oh, this went out. Let me do that. Okay, that's there. Oh, we're missing this. Okay, fix that there. And it's just a lot of troubleshooting and knowing how to fix stuff on the fly. And it's all very spontaneous and crazy a lot of times, and that doesn't really ever stop. I've been doing it for almost 4 years now, and it's still a new challenge every day that something happens, but it's still a lot of fun. And I love the interaction with chat and the community that you build through live streaming that isn't quite the same when you just have like edited work that goes out.
Yeah, speaking of community, I think Rachel does have a question in there.
Oh yeah. So when you're at conventions, do you spend most of your time at the Dice Tower booth or at the Gray Fox booth, game dev area?
So I am full time with the Dice Tower. So it is my day job to be at the Dice Tower booth. I love working at the Dice Tower booth. If we're at a convention where we have a Dice Tower booth and Dice Tower brought me in, then that's where I work. And we're basically there to kind of like show off the Dice Tower and be like, hey, this is a place you can meet and greet us and you can learn more about the channel, but also we'll have like promos and stuff like that, or Dice Towers to sell, or plushies or play mats and different stuff. And we're just there to interact with people. We normally do live shows at a lot of the events we do. I did have Gray Fox actually flew me into Board Game Geek Con last year. And since Gray Fox flew me in, I was there basically on vacation from the Dice Tower, working the Gray Fox booth, and basically the entire time for Board Game Geek Con, I just like demoed the entire time the hall was open. Like every minute the hall was open, I was demoing Last Light and trying to show it off to people. And then when the hall would close, I would go down to the open gaming area and try to set up more games of Last Light. So I was just trying to show it to as many people as possible because we were about to start running our campaign. And I was just like a huge, like, I'm a reviewer, and so it's kind of interesting to me because like most Kickstarters, you can't really get a real honest review of a Kickstarter game, And so it was my goal to try to play Last Light with as many people as possible, just try to show it to as many people as possible so they could make the decision for themselves. Because I want people to make an informed decision on if it's a game that works for them. I want them to feel comfortable being able to bring it to their game table and playing it with their friends and family and make an informed purchase, just because I'm a reviewer. And that's like my job, is to kind of like make sure people are making an informed decision on whether a game works for them or not, to try to help promote the hobby. If people are going to play a game that they don't like, it's not going to be good for anybody. We're not going to have as many people playing games around the table. So I want people to be excited and hyped about games that they're playing.
Does that make you, does being someone who has reviewed and does reviews kind of also make you more mentally prepared for, because I don't know, some designers may take it more personally than others when you put a game out and people write comments, so does that prepare you more for something like that? Because the type of things that people will say, and some reviewers aren't as nice, and other reviewers are, giving you glowing reviews.
Yeah, it's been kind of interesting. I mean, for me, I already work in the industry. So that's just one of the things I've always said with Last Light is like, I already work in the board game industry. I have a full-time job doing board game media and board game reviews. So it's like, if I'm going to make a board game, there's no reason for me to make an okay game, Right. Not to mention like, it'll be overly scrutinized by everybody being like, oh, this guy just got his game done because whatever. No, I needed to make something that was going to be like awesome and fun for people on their table. But yeah, it's been kind of interesting because I've been kind of shocked by how many people have been super excited about the game. And that's another thing, is I really wanted to get it outside of the Dice Tower and have a lot of other media content creators take a look at it, and like have other designers talk about the game and other people who played the game that aren't like my group at the Dice Tower. So it's not just my friends talking about it. It's like everybody talking about it. So you can get a unbiased opinion, I guess, on the game. Yeah. But it's also been interesting because, of course, you have the Board Game Geek ones and stuff like that. And it's like, oh, dag, like, oh, they're just rating it a 1 just because they don't like Gray Fox, or they don't think that there needs. There's people. Balance. Yeah. Well, there's plenty of people that are just like, oh, we don't need a fast playing 4X game. Why would you want a 4X game that plays in an hour? That's going to be watered down and boring. It's like, okay, cool, man. I mean, you haven't played it, but that's cool.
Rated it.
Thanks for rating it. But then I also get kind of annoyed the fact of like, people are rating a game that isn't even out yet as well, like positively rating it. It's like, well, you haven't even seen the final product yet. It's not actually in your hand. So
I mean, I was gonna say that's a really interesting take, because so often I see promotions like, hey, go rate the game, go rate my game. But you're right. It's like, if you haven't played, really, what review is significant prior to, or what one of those scores is. I imagine some of those folks play prototypes, but the one that always bugs me, I'll just say, is the one for balance purposes. That's the one that I'm like, come on, like, no, don't do that.
I guess. I mean, I have a decent amount of people that have ranked it on Board Game Geek, and a lot of it's really, really positive. So I'm kind of shocked by that. But the game isn't out yet, so it's just kind of like, it's not like, you shouldn't necessarily rate something that you haven't played like the full thing. A lot of people have told me that, I've asked like, hey, why'd you rate it? They're like, oh, like, I played the mechanics. I love the mechanics, so I'm going to rate it anyway. I'm like, okay, cool. But it could be even better if you play it with the cool planets and everything, that sort of thing.
Well, that's one thing I absolutely want to ask about the review process, because like you work at the Dice Tower, right? And the game is not out yet. When it does come out, there will be a swarm of reviews coming out. Are you concerned about any potential conflict of interest that could be either on the Dice Tower or outside of the Dice Tower with maybe some friends you may have had in the industry? Because it's a very I would imagine, for me, it would be a very tough situation,
Right. Yeah, for sure. Tom actually made a video about his thoughts on the game, which is super nice for him to do. There was a day where I was out of town. I was visiting family out of town. And the day I was gone, he made a video on Last Light without telling me. And it was just like my opinions on Last Light. And he went through being basically like, hey, Roy works here. This is like, you take this with a grain of salt, like all this stuff, but this is my honest opinion. Like, I've been doing reviews for years and years and years and years. This is what I think about the game, and it was just a first impression sort of thing, not really a full on review. It doesn't take into account like actual components or anything like that, but just gave his thoughts on the game just because he knew that he was just going to be constantly barraged with people being like, what is your editor's game like? Do you like your editor's game? That sort of thing. It will be interesting. And I mean, it's kind of hard I have legitimately cried over the fact of like when I designed this game, I designed it so that like Sam and Tom at the Dice Tower would like this game a whole lot. And the fact that I know that I would never get a fully objective review of the game outside the bubble of them knowing me so well meant like was actually kind of soul crushing to me, being like, dang it, I made it in the industry, but also I'll never get the real thing, you know?
Yeah.
And it kind of sucks. But there's still hope for like, I mean, like we'll see what other reviewers talk about it and stuff like that. I mean, I know a lot of people in the industry, but I'm not necessarily friends with everybody, you know. So it'll be interesting to see what a lot of other people say about it. I've had a ton of reviewers play it so far as like the prototype and stuff like that. And it's up on TTS now, so people can just play it on Tabletop Simulator if they want to and get their thoughts on how the mechanics and stuff work, or like skim the rule book on the GameFound page and stuff like that. But it'll be interesting to see how everything comes together, you know. We'll see.
And is do you still have, is it still available for that, like for sale if they missed on that one, or is it past that point? Where is it?
I think the GameFound Pledge Manager is currently still open.
It is.
So you can still get a copy of it through GameFound. But I don't know how much longer it's going to be open. It'll probably be closing like super soon, because I'm guessing like any day now, honestly, because it's been open for quite a while at this point. And it's just adding more to the, I guess, the order for the manufacturing. It's definitely been interesting seeing all the behind the scenes, because I've done a lot of board game media work, but now I'm seeing how things look from a designer standpoint of like manufacturing and like learning about what things happen with like licensing your games to other publishers if they want to do it for localization in a different company. What if somebody wants to make a Polish version of your game or a German version of your game? And it's stuff like that that I never thought about as just a media creator or a media consumer. That's like, oh, this is interesting behind the scenes stuff, you know?
Yeah, and you know, you obviously you do reviews, you do talk about a lot of games, and one of the things that you talked about earlier was playing a lot of games and learning the mechanics. What right now are your favorite type of mechanics in games that you're playing? You know, what are the common trends? I know, as an example, I'm sure we'll get there. I know you don't mind a nice deck builder, but you know, what are the kind of games that you find on the table these days for yourself when you're not testing your own game, which I know is, or playing your own game, which obviously you've spent a lot of time the past few years doing?
For me, there's so many mechanics. There's so many great mechanics, and it's hard for me to even pick it out just like one mechanic to be like, oh, this is my favorite. I really do enjoy games that just allow you to use resources in interesting ways. I know that sounds very Euro of stuff, but like I enjoy being able to get resources by doing certain things, but then using those resources to build like meaningful things, whether it be buildings to help your engine or units to go out on the board and to attack your opponents. I really enjoy a lot of that stuff, but just anything that helps me make those meaningful decisions as the game goes along. I like games that have agency as a player, you know, like anything that'll allow you to do that. I really enjoy like lots of asymmetrical powers. Like anything that has asymmetrical powers in it is amazing. I enjoy like custom dice, you know, any game that has like cool custom dice that have different faces that have meaningful things that they do when you roll those different faces. That's always a lot of fun. And I mean, I also like anything that allows for simultaneous play, like Race for the Galaxy or different things like that allow you to play simultaneously and kind of like speed the game up. Or like, what is it, the new Terraforming Mars, Ares Expedition or whatever? That game's really fun too. So that sort of stuff is really cool.
It's one of my favorites. So I get myself in trouble because I don't always I'd rather play it than Terraforming Mars, and not everyone.
That's common now, I think.
It's become more common, though. There's the dice version of it coming out now too. So now there's free versions of Terraforming Mars that are essentially available to people by the end of 2023. I don't know when the delivery date on the dice version is.
No, I don't know.
That's awesome.
Brian Chandler's asking a cool question, which I believe he says, "What's a recent game that pleasantly surprised you?"
That's a good question.
Yeah, Brian Chandler. Games.
I played Mosaic recently. I really enjoyed that one a lot. That is a big Civ game from Glenn Drover. Yeah, it's just this gigantic civilization game. that you're doing tons of different stuff, but it also plays very quickly. You're basically trying to do a little bit of area control out on the board, but you're also building up lots of technology, trying to collect a bunch of different symbols on these different cards to kind of help you get achievements and get points there. You're collecting money and getting workers to help you get money and put things out on the board and build more cities and things like that. One of the things I really loved about the game, though, is the fact that basically every player's turn was really, really quick. I like simultaneous actions, but if you can't do simultaneous actions, the next best thing is like extremely quick turns. Like, don't take 4 actions on your turn, take 1 action on your turn. You take an action, go, next player's turn, next player's turn, next player's turn. Downtime is such a huge deal for me, and like eliminating downtime as much as possible in a game is great. And that was like a Civilization game that gave you like a pretty cool Civ feel that only takes like a couple hours to play. And I was really impressed by it, and I had a lot of fun with it. So that's one of my favorite games so far this year is Mosaic.
I will say, friendly reminder to anyone who is watching, if you have any questions, feel free to drop them in the chat. We certainly encourage it. We thank those who have already asked some questions, of course, but definitely keep the questions coming. The one thing that stands out to me too, just amongst some of the games that you've talked before, and I want to get to it because, quite frankly, we're going to get here eventually, is the fact that one of the games that I know you love and you've talked about a lot is Marvel Champions.
Number one.
Yeah.
Number one.
Yeah. So what I got to ask, why does a game like Marvel Champions, because I remember when you said it, I remember when you said this is my number one, and I was just a joy to watch all the reactions to it, quite frankly. I don't think anyone was surprised at the table maybe, but why is that game been such a draw for you? What is it about Marvel Champions that has made it, number one?
So I grew up playing collectible card games. I used to play Redemption back in the day. I played Pokemon. I played Magic. I played all these different collectible card games. And then I played a ton of like role-playing games like D&D and stuff like that. And my love for board games really spawned from playing cooperative games. And I feel like Marvel Champions gives me a lot of all of that feel kind of mixed together. The fact that I'm playing a game that feels like a collectible card game as far as like how you're playing out the cards and you're manipulating stuff and doing damage and attacking things, but it's also cooperative, so you can work together on a team. The fact that you can also play it solo has been a lot of fun for me because I've played it over and over and over again solo. So it's like I'll play with my girlfriend and we'll have a lot of fun playing through the different characters. I'll go to a Dice Tower event and I'll play it with a bunch of other people there that really enjoy Marvel Champions. And the fact that you can get the game out and play it cooperatively with other people, and the fact that the decks come kind of like pre-built and kind of like make it easy. Like, oh, I got a new character. I don't have to worry about spending tons of time building the deck. Even though I love doing that stuff, it's finding the time as a responsible adult sometimes to actually build my decks the way that I want to, especially with all the other crazy things going on with all the Dice Tower stuff and design and family and going to events and all that stuff makes a strain sometimes. So the fact that I can get a pre-built deck, it's like, oh, I got the new X-Men deck. Let me plug Wolverine in here and actually just play him right away. Wolverine's not out yet, but soon.
Soon.
But yeah, I played Phoenix and it's a blast playing that. And like, you can throw it down solo and just play against some different stuff, or you can try Cyclops out and play it solo. And then it's like, okay, cool. Hey, you want to play? Let's play these guys that they kind of team up together and work together. There's a lot of cool combos and things you can come together. And I just really enjoy the card play of the game. I said that I really like resource management. I feel like Marvel Champions has a lot of that, like meaningful decisions and managing the resources. The main mechanic of the game is you have to discard other cards out of your hand to be able to play cards out. And just the choice of like, I have a hand of 6 cards. I can only play 2 of them maybe, or maybe 3 if I'm lucky, maybe just 1. But trying to figure out the math of which ones you're going to play, which ones you're going to keep. Probably not keeping any of them, but putting them all out and playing them out, which ones you're going to get rid of, and then just figuring out how to activate. I really enjoy, it's like tap or exhaust abilities in games. Like Magic has it, exhausting all your lands, exhausting these creatures to do cool abilities. Marvel Champions has that in spades. I mean, Last Light has a lot of exhausting your technology to trigger lots of cool abilities. I'm a really big fan of those mechanics and figuring out how to utilize the special abilities in front of you the best way you can. Just adds a lot of player agency and meaningful decisions as the game goes along, and Marvel Champions has that in spades. So,
yeah, and I applaud you for getting through all the Marvel Champions stuff too. I mean, you have that. I remember we messaged you because you had that awesome spreadsheet.
Yeah,
with
chart
of like the heroes all in one row and then the bad guys all. so you can just mark down which you've played.
That's been the way we actually attempted to start to try and play, because
just have it
we
printed.
weren't getting to everything. And so that was like, oh, let's do this, because at least this way we're crossing them off the list slowly but surely over time.
I have played every villain and every hero, but I definitely have not played every hero versus every villain, because that is quite frankly almost impossible at this point. So and there's people that take that sheet that I made. So I made that sheet with the little cross references, and they'll go even more granular than that. They'll mark it for each aspect. So it's like this hero with this villain with this aspect. They'll color it in that color for the aspect. So they need to play it again with a different aspect for it to count for each of one of the 4 aspects. It's like, it's just so crazy.
Marvel Champions. At that point.
Yeah, that's the only game they play. And I've actually, it's kind of funny because I play Marvel Champions, I would say pretty casually. Like I have this rule where I basically I have to keep all of the decks built at the same time as far as the hero decks go. So I'm not doing, I'll do a little bit of deck building. I'll be like, oh, this card worked better in this deck, or these are the extra cards that came in this. I'll put this in here. And I do a little bit of that mixing around. But I keep them all built at the same time. So if I want to play with anybody, I can say, hey, which hero do you want to play? And just grab that deck and we'll play with that hero. There's a lot of people that go, hey, we're going to play a game. Let's build a deck beforehand. I'm going to play Black Widow. Let me get the new cards that work with Black Widow and get this out of here and that out of there. I know there's some brand new cards that came in one of the decks that would be really good in Black Widow. Let me try that one out. And they really get big on the deck building and like min-maxing those decks and making them super optimized and awesome. And then they play against like expert this or heroic that. I just play everything at standard and play with these basically pre-built decks. And that's a lot of fun for me. And I can still play the heroes and try them out against different villains, you know?
Yeah. And you are right. It's so easy to just quickly set up. Like, you know, I compare, you know, Marvel Champions a lot to Arkham Horror, the card game, in terms of like a great feel cooperative thing, but you can't really quickly set up Arkham Horror and just bang it out. But Marvel Champions, you for sure can, and you can kind of swap them out too, you know? And yeah, obviously your passion about it is fantastic about it on the Dice Tower. Like I definitely watch your videos more than I play Marvel Champions at this point.
Well, hopefully I can help you make decisions, or at least you can see the heroes enough to be like, I can decide if I want it or not. In theory, you could maybe save money if you see one that you don't like, but I know everybody's completionist and they're just
our friendly local game store waits for me to show up to buy both of our 2 packs, and then I just drop one off to them. So they're waiting. System. Yeah, there's a system. They don't even ask me anymore. They just have them ready to go.
But sorry, I'm going to interrupt you. I do want to highlight one thing too. Going back to your work in the Dice Tower, coming into that, I feel like when you got onto the Dice Tower, we have a very different voice at the Dice Tower for sure. You know, with games with Tom has games that he loves. Z has a type for sure. You know, Sam at the time he has a type for sure. And like Roy, without like you talking about like Zaya, I love Zaya, you know, and you talking about that, I'm like, I gotta try this game. This sounds great. This sounds like something I want to try. So it's great to hear like your voice for sure on the Dice Tower, because now we have like a bit more of a different perspective, you know.
Yeah, I'm definitely heavily into like games with lots of theme, lots of interaction. Like I love games that are cooperative games because you're working with the other people at the table. I love games that are like area control games where you're head to head. I like games where you're playing with the people at the table, you know. I'm not as big a fan of like multiplayer solitaire or a game that's just like convert this cube into that cube or whatever that doesn't have as much interaction. I want to play a board game with other people. This is the reason I play like board games, is to interact with you and like figure out ways that we're going to play this game and manipulate the game. And even if people backstab me in the game or wreck me in the game, I still have a lot of fun with that. Just like the stories that can come out and emerge from these thematic games as you play them together. It's like, oh, remember that time they betrayed me in Battlestar Galactica? Or remember that time like we just almost barely beat the villain, but then we were able to take him out at the last second. Those things happen and like you remember them. And there's so many games out there. I know there's a huge fan base for the multiplayer solitaire games where it's like at the end of the game, he had 37 points, he had 36 points, you know, that's kind of all you remember. And like we did some math as we did it, you know. I'm actually pretty good at those games and I can learn them pretty well, but they don't have as much of an impact on me as like the other games do.
Well, then I have to ask, what is your favorite non-typical Roy Cannaday game? What is like the one that people wouldn't expect you to like as much as you do? Sorry.
I mean, it's weird because I mean, I'm normally into the really thematic ones. I really like engine building stuff. If you're going to get Euro, I really am a huge fan of like Gizmos. Is a game where it's just about points and building up your little engine, but I really enjoy how that engine progresses as you're like, oh, I take this red cube, and when I take a red cube, I get to do this, or not cube, but ball or whatever. And when I build this, I get extra point, and I do this and this and this. I really enjoy it. And if I'm going to play a Euro game that doesn't have a whole lot of interaction, I want it to be really quick turns and really snappy, so that way we can get through the game and get back to the thematic game, Yeah. But other than that, I really enjoy Century, which is another game that's really just spice cubes, trading them around. But it's just another one of those things where it's just quick turns, quick turns. It's a lot of fun.
We were talking about that one actually before. I believe that designer talked about Last Light in one of the Twitter posts a year ago.
Matsuchi posted
that's a fantastic game. What type of do you play a lot of games though with the family, like obviously outside of your own, or are you playing a lot with family outside of the board game group itself?
So I play with the Dice Tower for work a lot of times, but then I also play with my kids. I have I'm kind of like in a blended family. So I have my kids that have been playing games for years, and then my girlfriend's kids, we play games also. And it's kind of this interesting thing of playing a lot of different kids games and finding things that work for all those different age ranges. I played a lot of like Concept Kids, which is like this game about guessing different animals, and a lot of the Haba stuff we have a blast with. And we'll play just stuff like Go Away Monster, which is just like putting little things out and like grabbing.
Talking about that one,
literally took it off his shelf right before this, and like I was looking at it for like a minute there, thinking.
My 3-year-old loves Go Away Monster, and we love it too because he could grasp the rules and stuff.
And my kids love Core Quest as well, which is kind of like a little kids dungeon crawl made by Dan Hughes, which is actually part of the Dice Tower network. That game's a lot of fun if you want just like a dice chucking like story driven like romp of like beating up monsters and stuff like that. So that game's a lot of fun as well. I play that with my kids that are a little bit older too. And then I also play a bunch of games with my girlfriend. We play Marvel Champions, we'll play Clank, we'll play Project L. She'll play we played King of Tokyo. We also have a bunch of her friend group, which I play with as well. And they'll play a lot more party game style stuff and things like that. So it's all sorts of different games. And of course we do a lot of playing at Dice Tower events and conventions because those are all about playing games. So then I just get to play my favorites and show off games to all sorts of different people,
I don't want to miss out on this question. Mr. Coaster asked, how much time did Roy and others spend doing the stop motion numbers for the countdowns? Very cool, but I know very time intensive too.
Cool thing is we paid someone to do it, so Roy didn't spend any time doing it.
Outsourcing. I dig it.
But yeah, Tom had seen somebody who did those, and he worked to make those for us. And we were thinking about trying to go all the way to 100 with them. But literally the guy who said that he does them said it was too much work. And so he didn't want to continue to do more of them. Yeah. So yes, it's very time intensive. We got 10 through 1. So that's what we have currently. And I don't know if we'll be doing too much more of the stop motion things, just because even the people who do them are like, man, it's a lot of work.
But I do have to ask about the editing process. So you said you were brought on as an editor and you did Tom's videos from that time. And are you still doing Tom's videos? Like
I added several of Tom's reviews today. So
how long does the average Tom review take to edit?
It's actually really not that bad. Tom is like the master of like getting his takes like right. Like he knows what he wants to say about a game. He's been doing it for over a decade. So he can think about it in his head, turn the camera on and get it right basically the first time. And the only exceptions are like, oh, we forgot to turn on the microphone or something crazy like that. And then it's like, oh no. But yeah, so it's really just cutting off a lot of the ends, making sure we kind of have like a template. That's one of the things that's really good about Final Cut as opposed to Premiere is the fact that Final Cut's really good for like these projects that kind of like are the same thing over and over again. So we have like our intro and outro in place. Occasionally we'll change up intros and outros based on things. And then we have little bumpers in between. I just put the stuff in the right sections, chop off the different ends, make sure the audio sounds good, make sure to put in numbers for scores and things like that. Make sure to change out the seal of a approval, seal of excellence. And we actually have a video on the channel, like behind the scenes of a review or whatever. And basically Tom goes from the entire process of getting the game in the mail, opening it up, taking it to game night, playing it a bunch of times, then bringing it back to the studio, doing all the different parts. And then I show a little bit of me like, hey, I'm back in behind the scenes. I actually like screen recorded, Final Cut editing, chopping off the different pieces. And people are like, oh, it takes Roy like 10 minutes to edit this. I'm like, yeah, it takes me 10 minutes to do the editing part, but then I have to make the thumbnail and upload it to YouTube and then schedule it the right time and make sure that the description is right. There's a ton of different things that go on behind the scenes. But yeah, it's
Geek too. Or
yeah, I mean, we actually have we have to make sure to post it to Board Game Geek and make sure that goes through as well. And then we also have Kenny will also like make sure to tweet it out and stuff like that. So we make sure to have, there's just so many different parts of it as well, you know. But yeah, it's definitely very interesting. There's always something new and crazy going on. But yeah,
is there a favorite one you worked on? Because I can tell you right now, my favorite one that I've seen edited was actually the Groundhog Day board game.
Oh yeah, that was a blast to do. Yeah, sometimes we get to do some of those silly ones that are a lot of fun. And Tom, we were talking about Groundhog Day and we were joking around like, oh man, we should do repeating things. And the Groundhog Day one was one where he like recorded things over and over again. I had to splice it up and like we played like the Groundhog Day music and he got mad and stuff like that. We also had ones where there was one video where Tom like reviewed a version of Monopoly and he's like, now I'm going to go throw this thing in a fire. And like I was editing the video and I heard him say that as I'm editing it. I'm like, Tom, we don't have footage of you throwing this thing in a fire. And he's like, should we burn it? And I'm like, you said you were going to throw it in a fire. So we pulled out the grill and like, I'm like, I got kerosene in my car. We pulled out the kerosene. If I ever mentioned to Tom about like setting something on fire, he's almost always down for it. So we burned a copy of, I forgot, it was like one of the kids Monopoly things. And it was just like Monopoly, but worse than normal Monopoly. So we ended up setting that on fire. We did a marble track race when we had an old marble track that we were using for our marble races. And we had gotten a new one in. And I was like, Tom, you know what we should do? We should just light the old one on fire. And he's like, I'm down. So we recorded a live video of us playing on this marble track with like fireworks in it and like all sorts of crazy stuff. And we literally lit the track on fire and had the marbles going through it. There's been crazy videos where we've done all sorts of insane stuff like that before. So
I see Rachel mentioned that my daughter loved that Animal Crossing Monopoly episode.
It was Animal Crossing for sure. Yeah. I think it was just like Animal Crossing is cool. Animal Crossing is such a great video game. And the fact that they kind of like made Monopoly worse, but then the components were worse than normal Monopoly. It was kind of crazy.
Yeah. So I think that was my
phone. Your phone was searching for Animal Crossing.
It just ordered 3 copies of Animal Crossing Monopoly. You're now in trouble.
Oh,
we have a grill.
We have a grill outside.
No worries. We do charcoal here, though. I don't know if that's all right.
I think we had one question come in there too.
Yeah, I see. I have a question. Which is, have you yet discussed the impact of having beautiful components on enticing backers? I look at games like Beyond the Sun and here it's great, but can I bring myself to try it? Versus Roy's game looks great, and I'd be willing to try it, even though 4X isn't my jam.
So funny thing is, like, I really like aesthetics in games.
Yeah.
I'm a thematic gamer. I like when a game has table presence. I like when a game draws you in. I like when a game gives you that little push over the edge to be like immersed in the theme. I mean, if a game has like 3D components or just something that gives you more that theme or something that makes it more atmospheric, I enjoy the game more. Even when I would run D&D games, I would get the 3D terrain and try to like set up little castles and have my players run through those things. So when I started designing board games, I'm like, I want to have a game that looks amazing on the table. Part of that also was the fact that like when I make prototypes for games, I also make them look awesome and ridiculously good. So that way I can get people to play the game with me, because people, it's a lot hard to get someone to the table to be like, hey, will you try out these cue cards and these white boards or whatever that's kind of Sharpie drawing on them. If it looks really cool, it's a lot easier to get people to want to play a game. So having a cool looking prototype that had 3D planets from the beginning, I mean, even when I was first testing out Gen Con, like I said, people were stopping by being like, what is this? I've never seen this before. Like, this looks crazy. Sure, I'll try it out, even though I don't know you and I don't know why I would, but it looks cool. So I'm going to sit down and play it. So, and just so many demos and playtests of Twilight Imperium have people just stopping by that aren't playing the game being like, I want to play that, you know, that looks awesome. What is it? And then we tell it what it is and they don't believe me until they actually play it themselves, you know? when you say 1 hour 4X, most people are like, yeah, right.
That's still me to some degree. I'm not gonna lie.
Well, one of these days, Ryan, you'll try it, and you'll be like, oh, I guess we have to like
PAX
change
Unplugged.
how we think
will
about
it be coming to PAX Unplugged in some form demo?
I don't know if Gray Fox is bringing it or not, and I will definitely be working Dice Tower at that convention, so I don't know how much I'll be able to demo it myself. I should look into that because I'll make some posts about it if Gray Fox is going to be there. So, but I know they did Gen Con and played and we're demoing it a bunch there, and they do Board Game Geek Con.
They just put out a list for it too, but I did not look at it for some of the. They put out a list the other day of some of the folks
of all the exhibitors. Cool.
So
that last question too, that it ended with 4X isn't my jam, and that's something I wanted to ask you. With players that don't like 4X, how are their reactions overall to Last Light? Like are they interested in actually backing it immediately right after, or
I've been so shocked and surprised by how many people after standing up from the game have been like, I'm going to be an all-in backer. And this was before the campaign happened, and I'm like, you don't even know what that means. Like, how can you even say that? But that's been exciting and shocking. But the people that have tried it, normally they shied away from that style of game because they were too long, or they seemed too heavy, and by making it faster and more streamlined, I've inadvertently made a game that's just more accessible to like a wider scope of people in general, but still gives you like that feel of playing like a full 4X game, which has been kind of crazy. But yeah, it's been very interesting seeing people that are like, oh, I don't like space, I don't like 4X. Like, you can go watch Thinker Themer's review of the game, or their first impressions or whatever. They did like a little Kickstarter. It's coming to GameFound. This is what we think about it. And they're like, we don't like space, we don't like 4X, but we love this game. That's just kind of mind blowing to me. I did a lot of things to try to make things also where like the combat is asynchronous. So like it's got a lot of interaction and a lot of combat, and the combat can be like very in your face where you're fighting back and forth with each other, but it doesn't feel punishing the way a lot of other games are. Because the fact that like you play command, you can jump on somebody and attack them, and you're not immediately going to take retribution back, just makes it easier to like have reasons to attack. So many times in Twilight Imperium and Eclipse and even Heroes of Land, Air, and Sea, you build up these gigantic armies and never get to use them because you're just like, if I attack them now, we're just going to wipe each other out and we're both going to be taken out of the game. Last Light makes the ships are pretty cheap to get back on the board, and like you're just constantly going after each other. And it at the same time doesn't feel that personal. It's like, oh, you attacked me now, I'll attack you next time. It just makes it so that you have more reasons to actually fight each other, but then don't get as upset about it, which is interesting as well. And I think that has made it so that people that don't like interaction have still enjoyed the game more too. Cause it's like, oh, I fought them, I lost some ships, but I can easily build ships back. And it's not going to be that hard for me to get back into the fray, where in so many other big games, like, oh, they attacked me, now I feel like I'm going to be crippled the rest of the game, that sort of thing.
And you just hit on one of my largest challenges because I had a copy of Twilight Imperium, I think I had the 3rd edition. And that was what happened in the one time I actually played the game, was I had all these ships and I didn't get to do much with them in a certain section. And I felt, because of some of the things that you just described. So I love the fact that, you can get action, feel like you can rebuild, because I do think that makes a difference. And the time is obviously a huge piece. Speaking of time, this game, as you noted, you said the pledge random race will be up there, but if anyone is interested, I guess it's fair to say you should probably go check it now, because based on what you've said, it's probably not up there much longer.
Right. Yeah, for sure. And another thing going back to that is everybody's had like those games of Eclipse where it's like you can change out your ship mods in Eclipse, and it's like, okay, I'm going to put missiles on. Well, I'm going to put armor on. Well, I'm going to put better guns on. Now I'm going to put better computers on. It's like you're sitting there like waiting to see who can get the strategic advantage to actually attack the other player. Last Light's so fast paced and frivolous that you don't have to have those like Armistice lines, that you can just be more interactive, and it just makes it more fun and more, it's definitely more casual and more tactical, but I mean, it's just faster in general, so it's a lot of fun. And you don't have to feel as hurt when you get your stuff blown up in a game that takes an hour as opposed to a game that takes 8 hours,
That definitely happens. I think on my last game with TI4, that totally happened. Like, oh, okay, I'm out. But
It sounds like overall you're describing the experience, much like you described Battlestar Galactica earlier, because I think everyone, if you've played Battlestar Galactica, you remember one of your experiences from that game. You remember, I remember, for example, we played a game and there was me. Someone thought I was a traitor the entire time because we kept bickering and we kept putting each other in the brick. And neither one of us was the traitor, and we almost screwed each other over. So
it was me.
You were, yeah.
It was a good one.
Well, the other person was Gaius Baltor. It just thematically worked. I really thought he was the.
If you play Gaius, you should just be throwing the brig anyway. Come on.
Yeah.
You're wanting to be a Cylon. You're automatically not trusted.
Yeah. I agree completely. No, I want to just say, first and foremost, thank you for your time. If anyone does have any other questions, I want to give them a chance to do it. Obviously, you've said good chance people then see you at PAX Unplugged. So if you're going to PAX Unplugged, make sure you do go say hi at the Dice Tower. I know in the past when Dice Tower was there too, you had a lot of those great promos and other stuff that was left. Mm-hmm. So if you've missed promos, I know very much I tried to get those promos at PAX Unplugged. So but definitely you should go say hi to Roy. Is there anything else or anything else you want to get out there tonight? Any other cool projects you're working on or any exciting videos you can tease coming up?
We're always doing lots of new exciting reviews and things like that. And that's always fun. We have a ton of games that we just got back from Essen. So we're busy playing a lot of that stuff, and I'll be in reviews here and there for that sort of stuff. This week we're doing lots of live streams of games, trying to get those played. So that way we can review them in future weeks. But yeah, one thing I really want to plug is we're ramping back up with all of our Dice Tower events. We have the Dice Tower Cruise, which is basically like a board game con on a cruise ship. It's my favorite board game event possible because it's like buffets and board games. I mean, it's amazing. But yeah, or the Dice Tower Retreat, Dice Tower East and Dice Tower West. So we have Dice Tower East is in Orlando and Dice Tower West is out in Vegas. These are all events where we bring like a gigantic library of games and just have people play games like the whole time. And that's the main draw, is just we have hot upgraded games, like a library that's cultivated of games that are just solid games. So yeah, if you haven't looked into these different Dice Tower events, check it out. And I will be at basically all of them. So if you want to try to get a chance to play Marvel Champions with me, or Unmatched, or even Last Light, or Heroes of Land, Air, and Sea, there's a good chance that I'll be playing those sort of things at those conventions. And it'd be awesome to have more people join in on those things too as well, because they're a blast to play at.
Awesome.
Well, I don't know. Do we have any other questions coming in? I want to make sure I didn't miss any here.
I think that's it.
Yeah, Corlu was just, by the way, mentioning 3D printers being an asset, which these days for everyone from designers. So I do want to bring that up. But Roy, I want to thank you for taking time to chat with us tonight. We'll certainly encourage everybody to go check out Last Light. As I noted, you still can get in an order on it potentially. It looks like on Pledge Manager. So if you're interested after what Roy said tonight, I wouldn't wait too long to do that. I want to thank everybody for watching. I do want to take this time, since we're both here, to talk about it. We are going to be a PAX Unplugged, so we hope to see everybody there as well. Be around on the way. So.
And next week we'll be back for an On the Table.
Yes.
Following week, we are doing a Call Aboard, or are we doing
Call Aboard, or Rear Window, or both. Rear Window is the moving piece that we've had, I know, for the last month and a half, but I swear we're going to play it. But yeah, and then we're going to have another Creator Corner or two coming up in the next few weeks, so stay tuned on the channel for more Creators Corner.
All right, y'all.
Awesome.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, everybody.
See you later.